Here's an example of a two-dimensional array. So suppose I have a data set with, say, 2 rows and 5 columns, and what these represent are 2 different cities that have 5 different temperature recordings for each of the cities. So I'm going to record these variables as C1 T1 through C1 T5. In other words, the first city is on the first row, and then the second city is on the second row. And in order to get SAS to read those in as separate variables, I'm using this slash. Then I want to store those variables in this two-dimensional array. So as opposed to what we've been doing before, storing everything in a single array, which you could do that for this program and it would work just fine. But if it makes more sense to you to use a two-dimensional array instead, you can do that. And here's the syntax. I'm going to use a comma between the two numbers that tell me how many rows and how many columns I have in this array. And then I just store the variables in that two-dimensional array, and then what I want to do is run a nested do loop through this. I'm going to go from I goes from 1 to 2 and J goes from 1 to 5, and then I just want to round off the temperatures for each of the cities to the nearest whole number. And that's all this does. And then if I print it out, I'll show you what happens. We just end up with the rounded off temperatures for the 2 cities and their 5 temperatures. Another fun thing to do is this. Suppose I have some financial data for 3 different families. I'll show them to you here. I have their monthly incomes for 12 months of the year for 3 different families, and what I want to do is find out if there was any month in each family during which they had less than half the income of the previous month's income. So here's the idea. Let's throw their 12 months income into an array. That's what that array has. And then I'm going to create a new array. This is empty right now. But as I'm creating it, I'm going to throw some variables. And again, I haven't initialized these variables. But you do have to initialize arrays in SAS. You don't have to initialize variables. So I'm just going to initialize the array with some empty variables, if that makes any sense. And notice what indices I'm using. This does not symbolize 2 dimensions like we had with the comma between 2 numbers. Rather, this tells us what's the first number and the last number of the array. If I had just said low inc with a bracket and then a 12, it would have created an array with 12 spots in it for 12 variables, and the numbers for those variables would have been 1 through 12. Instead of doing that, I want an array that has 11 variables in it, but I want those 11 numbers to be 2 through 12 because it's going to make my life a little bit easier. It makes it easier for me to think about. So I'm going to use that colon to create low inc 2 through low inc 12. So the first variable in this array is going to be low inc 2 rather than low inc 1. Then I'm going to run through this do loop, and what this loop says, okay, month is like my I variable that I usually have, and month is going to run from 2 to 12. And then I'm going to say if the income for this particular month is less than half of last month's income, so you see why I'm starting at month 2. I don't have income data for last year's December income, so I can only do this for February through December. So if this month's income is less than half of last month's income, this is how I'm getting last month's income, then this variable, these are these variables that I created up here, is going to be a 1, else it's going to be a 0. And then what I can do is I can sum these up. I'm going to go along summing. So then if the sum low equals 0, then the result is no. else the result is yes. In other words, I just want to know whether or not they had any month in the whole year that had an income less than half of the previous month's income. And if they didn't, then the result is going to take on the value no. If they did, it's going to be yes. So it's just a yes or no variable. That's all I wanted. So I can even drop these if I really want to and just keep the result. But to show you what's going on, let me go ahead and keep all three of those variables, and you can see that for family 2, there was 1 month when they had an income that was less than half of the previous month's income. June was just a bad month for them. And so when I sum up all of these zeros and the single 1, I end up with a sum of 1, which is just anything different from 0. And so I have a yes there. And you can look at it here in the original data set. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see in this month's June, this family had a bad time. It was less than half of their previous month's income.